So we'll have a little less time in the end for Q&A, but very, very excited to bring in our last two speakers who are part of the Global Literacy Project, which they'll talk more about, and also its relationship with Games for Change. We have Tinsley Galyean, who is a research affiliate at MIT Media Lab program and was also the co-director of the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformational Values. And we also have Stephanie Gottwald from the Center for Reading and Language Research at Tufts University. And I will give you the mic.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us today and for coming to our talk. Tinsley and I are going to present to you some details and a description of the Global Literacy Project, which is a collaboration between the MIT Media Lab, Tufts University, Georgia State University, and the Dalai Lama Center. We believe this is a very innovative and ambitious project which seeks to bring a platform to children regardless of where they are in the world, which would allow them to become literate. This project began a few years ago. One of the things that we'll be showing you today is some of the deployments themselves, as well as showing you some video from kids in the field actually interacting with the tablets, actually interacting with the content. We're here at Games for Change in order to, first of all, ask you to become involved in what we hope is a truly global community of content developers. One of the barriers to us achieving our goals is knowing that there just isn't enough high-quality content out there for children to reach their goals of becoming fully literate. And so we would ask you to become part of this global community that seeks to create content that goes way beyond some of the literacy content that's already been created, many of which have quite limited goals. So teaching children, for instance, just the names of letters. We want children to, regardless of where they are, have access to the kind of content which allows them to see literacy as not just a code that you then somehow spit out when you get to school, but rather the way we use literacy as a true source, as a tool, a source of knowledge, a way for us to investigate and have access to information and to be able to analyze that information and go beyond just the content as it's presented to you on the page. So we seem to be having a little bit of difficulty transitioning to our slides. So let me just tell you a little bit of why we decided to engage in this project. First of all, we know at one level that the problem itself is quite enormous. There are approximately 72 million children in the world who do not have access to school. So either the schools are too far away, or the path to that school is too dangerous, or they live in areas where their parents can't afford the fees for sending them to school. In addition to that, there's another 100 million children in the world who attend school, but those schools are so poorly resourced that even after going to school for 3 years or 4 years, very few of those children actually learn to read, whether it's in their own language or in an aspirational language. Those numbers feed the overall number of illiterate adults that we know now is approximately at around 800 million people. And actually, we probably could find a great deal more than 800 million people in the world. The standard that's used for establishing someone as being literate is by asking them if they can write and read a simple sentence or two about who they are, where they work, where they live. And of course, we know that true literacy goes way beyond just being able to read a sentence or two. So it's likely that there are many, many more than 800 million illiterate adults in the world. At the same time, we know that there's a great deal of research on the effects of illiteracy on factors like health outcomes, economic development, gender equality. There's a great deal of data in many parts of the world where illiteracy is a true issue that shows that having a young girl attend school for just an additional year makes it more likely that her own children will be able to survive beyond the age of 5. So it's not, the effect is not just for an individual person, but goes beyond and has becoming literate affects their own children and the health outcomes and economic development of the next generation. Now, on top of that, the work that we do at the Center for Reading and Language Research tells us, along with many others around the world, that becoming literate fundamentally changes your brain, fundamentally changes how your brain takes in information, processes information, and connects with the rest of the world. So one could argue by maintaining this world where illiteracy is a huge factor for so many people, that they are not only excluded from the global economy, but they're also excluded from this very different way of thinking that we take for granted as fully literate people. Now, why is it that we think now is a good time to engage in such an ambitious project? We believe that there is a moment in time that we have reached where there are some fundamental forces that can be joined, that can come together, that make such an ambitious project possible. First of all, the first factor is the ubiquity of smartphones, of mobile technology in general. And on top of that, the expanding network, data network that is quickly connecting everyone, regardless of where you live, regardless of how remote you are. The second factor is the development of knowledge and tools related to big data analytics. You know, it's no use engaging in such a project if we don't know that it's actually working, if we don't know that the children are learning how to read. Thirdly, there's a great deal of work that's been done on child-driven learning. What would it take for children themselves to be their own curators of their own knowledge, to be the guide for becoming literate? You know, I think I speak for many in this room when I myself would remember that much of the learning that happened in my life occurred not because I wanted to do well on some test, or not because I was afraid of what my parents would say if I didn't make an A, but rather because I myself was curious about that particular aspect, about that particular bit of knowledge. And finally, there has been, in the last 30 to 40 years, an enormous amount of work that's been done all over the world on what it takes to learn to read in any language, what it takes to learn to read in English, what it takes to learn to read in Chinese. So these four factors, the growing ubiquity of mobile technology, big data analytics, of child-driven learning and reading research, create a unique moment in time in which we are certain that we have the tools that we need to make this a reality. However, at the same time, we also have on-the-ground knowledge which has inspired us to expand the project beyond its initial pilot. So approximately 2 years ago, and my eyes are meeting Matt Keller in the back of the room, who was absolutely instrumental in making this happen, but around 2 years ago, we partnered with One Laptop Per Child in order to distribute tablets to children who were living in 2 villages, very remote villages in Ethiopia. In fact, one of the villages is so remote that they're around 5 kilometers away from a water source. Now, no one in these villages is literate. No one in these villages speaks English. And in Ethiopia, English is a very important language of instruction. So beyond a certain age, if the children do get to go to school, English would be an important language for them. When we handed out the tablets, there was absolutely no instruction given. In other words, we didn't tell the children even how to turn on the tablets. And remember, these are villages where the children are unlikely to have ever seen an on-off switch. And we learned some very, very important things about the potential success of this project from that pilot. In about a year, we learned, first of all, that technological literacy is just not an issue. Thank you. Okay. So we asked ourselves the question, can we develop a theoretically based digital learning experience for mobile devices that would allow children to learn to read on their own? And first of all, what we found in these villages in Ethiopia is that technological literacy is just not an issue. Within 4 minutes, one of these kids learned how to turn on the tablets by themselves, ran around screaming, "I am a lion," and then proceeded to show all the other kids in the village how to turn on their tablets. Second of all, we also learned that alphabetic knowledge doesn't seem to be much of an issue. Very, very quickly, the children were learning the names of the letters, were learning how to recite the alphabet, could write those letters either in order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or could write them randomly. So they had truly acquired the alphabetic system. And a small subset had learned to read sight words. So words that you see so often that you just know how to read them without necessarily sounding them out, so to speak. So in other words, these children, after having the tablets in their hand for about a year, had acquired approximately the same degree of literacy skills that they would have acquired had they been in a year of kindergarten here in a well-resourced school. That's amazing. That tells us that alone this platform has the potential to make learning to read possible for any child. The only barrier that exists is the actual content. What do we have to present to the children to make that learning possible? But let's take a moment to actually look at what was happening in the class, or in the deployments themselves.
Can we play the video? Oops.
The children's tablets probably works better than our technology here. Are there any questions so far? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The children in this particular village, they speak a dialect of Oromo. While we don't yet have any Oromo material, any Oromo content, we hope to have Oromo content in the future. In fact, in the long run, any of our deployments would not only include potentially all the content that the children would need to learn and speak in English, but would have the content that they need in order to read in their own languages.
Kun maal jedhamti?
Haat,
Tuni hoo?
dog,
Tuni hoo maal jedhamti?
cow,
Tun?
donkey,
Tun?
horse,
Tun?
mother,
Tun illee?
father,
Kun maal jedhama?
baby.
Babe.
It's pretty remarkable, huh? I'm going to hand the microphone over to Tinsley now, and he can tell you a little bit more about the project.
So it's kind of an amazing testament to child-driven learning that these kids kind of self-organized and brought themselves to this level that rapidly. Can you hear me? There it goes. Okay. So what we're looking at is a platform. And, as you've already gathered, what we're doing is we're putting out Android tablets that have a collection of apps on them that have been curated. But at the same time, that platform is collecting data about how those apps are being utilized and streaming that back to our servers. So as we look and analyze that data, we can tell how long kids are spending with each app, and for the apps that are equipped more deeply, exactly what they're doing within those apps. And we're on the verge of starting to use the tablets actually as an assessment tool too. Some of the apps give us a little bit of that, but we're looking at specific app development for assessment as well. So what this allows us to do when we have all these deployments in the field is that we can rapidly iterate. We can send stuff out. The same network that brings us data back can push down updates to apps or new apps. So we can, as we like to say, fail quickly and fail often until we get it right. So where are we? You saw from the video that we're in Ethiopia. We have deployments in rural Georgia and Alabama in areas where parents are kind of questionably literate. Kids come woefully underprepared to schools. In that context, we're not only in kindergarten and first grade classrooms trying to facilitate and help kids, but also have a deployment out to preschool kids to be with the tablets before they get to school to see if we can help bring them up to speed before they come into the classroom altogether. We also have a new deployment in Uganda, and I'll show you a little bit of early video from that just went out a couple months ago. It's fun that deployment, we have a lot more video about exactly how the kids interact over the first few weeks, and I'll share some of that with you. In June, we have deployments going out in India, in Bihar, around Varanasi in the Maharashtra region. We have deployments going out in Bangladesh and South Africa. There are other ones that are in the pipeline. So, a good group of deployments, an opportunity for us to really test and make sure this works across multiple different cultures and situations. Our focus so far has been on literacy, and specifically English literacy. But once the platform's out there, there's the ability to think about it used for any kind of content that's out there. In Bangladesh actually will be our first deployment, where our deployment partner is actually locally developing apps in Bengali, and those will be on the tablets beside the English apps, so that we have a collection of other content that's going out there. So, and there's been requests already in Ethiopia for health and hygiene apps for those populations, and that's an obvious one. And then, of course, numeracy, STEM skills in general, native languages and other languages. And one of our partners who I'm affiliated with, the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformative Values, is particularly interested in how this platform can be utilized to promote character development and ethical thinking. So, also, the advantage to these multiple different cultures is that we can start to look at how to cross-couple those and have sharing between those different ones. Okay, so if you can... You're doing it now. Okay, so go forward. So this is some video from Uganda. I think if it'll play, maybe not.
And just while I know we're running about 5 minutes behind, since we started it, I'm giving them another minute. And also, next up, I hope some of you guys
This
figure
won't
out we're
play.
having an open mic session. So I don't know how many of you guys came and
Okay.
to do a brief talk and about whatever topic you would like to talk about. This is a big experiment. So you just put your cards in here. But
Two more slides.
we'll wrap this up in a Q&A or so.
Please. No.
So you didn't get to see the first two videos of them learning to turn on the tablets by themselves, but this is 2 weeks into the project. The kids self-organized. They decided amongst themselves that they wanted to lay out these tablets in this way, bring up the pianos apps, and create this kind of collaborative experience where they're playing with it. It's one of the misnomers. A lot of people think when you hand out tablets, kids are going to run off and play with them by themselves, and we just don't see that. They collaborate, they pass them back and forth, they lean over each other, they show each other what they're doing. It's an incredibly collaborative experience for them. So I'll end on, we need help. Stephanie and her work has really identified, particularly with English literacy, that there's maybe 20% of the kind of apps that we need to bring kids into literacy available. And so we're starting to kind of outline all these different areas where new content needs to be developed, and it's really the development community worldwide that we want to help activate to solve that problem. So if you look at our website, we're going to be putting up there more and more material about what kind of apps need to be developed and how to help us with that.
So as we're transitioning sections, I'll let any last-minute questions for the Global Literacy Project or for any of the other speakers that were here. And in the meanwhile, anyone who wants to be a speaker, put your
Ethiopian deployment, the children have the tablets in their village. They don't have a school to go to. So what you see there is not only that the children are self-organizing in these learning groups, but that also the adults are keenly interested in what they're doing. So a short time ago, the German and French television station Arte produced a story about this project. And I bring that up because at the end of the report, there was a great little interview of one of the adults in the village, presumably one of the grandfathers. And he was discussing how great he thought it was that the children were learning. And then he began to recite the English alphabet himself, got to about F, and then started making a bunch of mistakes. And the kids laughed and they joined in. So there's this incredible enthusiasm among the adults and the children in the village for learning in this very, very different way. And certainly that's a consideration that we hope to continue to promote in all of our deployments, even if they're in a school setting. But we know from our data in Alabama and Georgia that the way children interact with tablets in school is very, very different than the way that they interact with the tablets at home. You know, some children may just barely look at the apps while they're in school, but when they take the tablets home, all of a sudden they are much more focused, much more concentrated, and will play with a particular app for a very long period in time. Mm-hmm. Yes, so actually Dr. Mitra was an early consultant at an early stage of this project, and his work does serve as an inspiration for further investigation of the role that children play in their own learning and what role we as adults can play. I think it's a misnomer to think that either his work or this project is trying to get rid of teachers, but rather there's a great deal that needs to be discovered if we're going to throw tablets or computers in front of kids as to what the strengths are of that kind of learning versus what we can do as adults or teachers to promote learning. Maybe what we need to do is think more about how we as teachers can transition to a role of curator rather than being kind of this omniscient source of learning. And I think the tablet is a great way to promote exactly that kind of role for the adults in kids' lives. Mm-hmm.
It was mentioned that you can push out content to the tablets, whenever you want to. I'm curious what kind of data connection is available in these countries.
Well, more and more of our deployments have an actual data connection. It's not necessarily high bandwidth or reliable, but the tablets hold the data and push it up when it can and then trickles down when it can. If we have some delay as to days before we get the data and it comes back, it's not tragic. Ethiopia is an exception to that. It's way off the grid. And actually somebody goes to the village every month and swaps out the SD cards, and that's how it happens. But more and more of our deployments, there's some way to get to them by a cellular network.
3G?
Yeah, so what will happen is a 3G cellular Wi-Fi hub will be put there, and it's not a high bandwidth, but it's enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a mesh network, right? So they all communicate with each other.
They could. We're not doing that currently. Currently, the way the deployments work is there's a central hub, and they come to it. So.
Very cool.
Do you think it's important to evolve to a teacher training module as well, or do you want to take to students itself? Because the lack of quality and
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough problem to tackle, and I can see and appreciate the role for that kind of teacher training in the future. I think out of necessity, there are going to be certain deployments where we can't really include that because, say, for instance, our kids in Ethiopia don't have access to schools. So there are no teachers to train. Although what we do see is a very interesting sociological development, really the birth of the first schools. In the village in Ethiopia, there was a hut that was built to house the solar charging unit. And while we didn't intend this to be the case, the children have adopted that as their place to meet and use the tablets. It's shady, there's no cooking going on in that hut. And the older girls in the group have have tended to take over the role as teacher. So there might be something that was discovered by one of the other kids that was new that we pushed out to the tablets. They discover it first. They don't run around and tell the whole group necessarily anymore. They run and tell this older girl, and then she proceeds to teach the rest of the children. But in other parts of the world where we are working together with schools, there certainly will be a need to build on what we're doing with the tablet to involve teachers more intimately. I think our deployment in South Africa is particularly ripe for that. I've been doing a lot of teacher training in South Africa over the last 4 years. So joining that effort to the tablet project would be, I think, hugely fruitful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.